Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast with Raamon Newman. He's enabling the top 1% CEOs to get better and more deals faster. So we're going to talk about the CEO mindset, high pressure decisions, leadership development, and everything in between. He's co-founder and CEO at New Mavericks, for the record, in the LA area, also an author, and a bunch of other things which we're going to talk about today. This pod is brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start your own podcast or scale it, monetize it, go to podfire.com. Raamon, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Oh, thank you, Charles. Great to be here. And yeah, basically, I'm originally from New Zealand, as I mentioned before, and I grew up there for the first 20 years of my life. And as most Kiwis do, we have an itch to explore the greater world. New Zealand's a pretty small country with only about 5 million people there. So we go on what we call the big OE, overseas experience. And some of us don't come back for a while. So I'm 50 now, and I've basically lived overseas, mostly in the US, for the last 30 years, and had some adventures in that time, ranging from, well, first of all, burning out as a competitive athlete in my late teens, early 20s, trying to qualify for the World Junior Championships in the 1500 meters. That led to my quote unquote, awakening, if you like, that, there's more to life than just driving hard and trying to achieve things. And I literally flipped the script on that and became a full-time meditating monk at the age of 25. I was going to do that for 1 year, meditating 8 hours a day for seven days a week for 1 year. After 1 year, I was loving that lifestyle so much and the experiences so much that I decided to do another year. And that second year evolved into a third, fourth, fifth, 10 years later, still meditating as a full-time monk. And so after 10 years, I kind of had, let's say, purified a lot of the stresses I'd created through my athletic endeavors, and decided that I wanted to bring some new value into the world and kind of reboot myself, and basically went to New York City and did an acting program to reintegrate with the world. So I went from being in a very silent monastic environment to being in the busiest, most dynamic marketplace in the world. This was in 2007. And I did an acting program there because I had all this deep development of interconnection to self. New York makes you have a lot of outer connection with your environment, and acting especially is all about great connection. Great acting is great connecting. That's what makes acting and film and TV so interesting, when we see two people connecting. And so that was a great experience, so much so that I decided to, after that summer program of 6 weeks, enroll in a couple of semesters of full-time acting training and performing. And so that rolled me into 2008. And then my business partner now calls me up and says, "What are you doing?" He'd just come out of the Himalayas after 6 years there. He'd been 15 years a full-time meditating monk. And I said, "I don't know. I'm just doing this acting program, reintegrating into the world." He said, "Well, how are you going to make money? It's really tough to make money in acting." I said, "Yeah, I know. I haven't really thought about it." He said, "Well, why don't we continue what we started actually as monks, as being silent partners to business leaders." So back then we would just meditate 8 hours a day. We get business leaders to support us in that process. We'd talk with them every now and then to help them debunk some stresses for them and understanding. And I said, "Well, no one else is offering me a job right now, so let's go to work." And so since then, since 2008, we've built a business working with CEOs of multi-million, multi-billion-dollar companies. Our biggest client does over 10 billion in revenue. The first year we started with them, they had just reached 1 billion in revenue after 90 years in business. And the last 10 years, and on the 100th anniversary, they're doing close to 11 billion in revenue. And that kind of speaks to the power of, really developing a deeper leadership capacity and psychology and mindset as to creating, better possibilities. And we all know it's all a field of all possibility. Live and make the best possibility happen. Serving leaders on this inner development game so that their outer development is not only enhanced, but also protected. Because, as we know, we all go through moments where we achieve and then something happens, something goes wrong, we get unhealthy, we get something backfires on something, and we maybe lose that momentum. So we wrote a whole book about the science of protection, making high pressure, impactful leadership decisions that protect and enhance you and everyone. And so that was really designed to help people understand that, yes, we all have a science of achievement that we're going through in our own way. It does continue to, and we can build on it, rather than we achieve and then we collapse. And then we try and achieve, and it's like a zero-sum game of achievement going through that cycle. So that's what we're up to, and we're just about, really serving more and more CEOs. And there's a great need out there right now. The JetBlue CEO, vulnerable and open about why he resigned. He actually said, due to the pressures and challenges of the role and what he'd been through over the past year, and advice with his doctor and talking with his wife, he said it was time to really focus on his health and well-being. So it's very important.
Tough job to be a CEO. Most people, like me, I sort of laugh when there's like a ratio of 26-1 between the CEO and the lowest paid employee, or average employee salary, because the CEO's job is literally probably 26 times more demanding than a normal employee job. People don't realize that. And they need massive, massive, massive machines to compress the stress, So if people think about that, well, they probably need also 26 more times resources to just be able to operate, right? So to have a routine, to let go of all that stress, they need to have coaches, they need to have people checking their health, Why is it so stressful to be a CEO nowadays?
Well, one's the accelerated pace of change that's gone in the world. I mean, when I was born back in 1973, there was 3.9 billion people in the world. 50 years later, there's double that. And we have a whole digital age that has come upon us. So things move and change very, very quickly. And just also the fact that as a CEO, you pretty much have to know the what, when, why, how, and where of what's going on in your business. We have different roles that people play: COO, CMO, and they're like the CMO, for example, is responsible for who are we going to market this product and service to? The CFO is like, what's going on in the books. Now the CEO has to have a mind and develop brain physiology to be able to oversee all of that and integrate it and create coherence amongst all of that. So they're primarily responsible for the evolution of the business and the people in that business and their livelihoods, because the buck stops with the CEO, ultimately, and strong in their ability to lead, or they become stressed, tired, and fatigued, and their prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO of them, starts to not see things clearly, then that's when things go wrong, and this is where we need to protect that development of this part of the brain so that they're always as close to 100% coherent nearly all the time. You really have to be on your A game all the time, especially if you're a public listed CEO, because your company's in the public eye and you've got accountability to board, shareholders, customers. It's a big ask, to be able to take on that responsibility. And, a lot of CEOs don't have that longer tenures because of that, because the challenges and the opportunities, or the size of the opportunities, sometimes gets the better of them, that they're bigger than what their capacity has to handle them. And so that's why we always encourage. Actually, I'm going to leave you with, I'm going to tell you this quote and see if you can recognize who it's from. Evolution is the most powerful force in the universe. It is the only thing that is permanent, and it drives everything. Do you know actually who said that? Have you ever seen that quote? No, it was actually Ray Dalio. And Ray Dalio is a CEO, founder of one of the most successful hedge funds in the world, right? It's a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund, hugely successful. And I asked myself the question, why would someone like that, very practical, logical business person, say something so philosophical? And it's because he understands the greater dimension of things, and he has deeper principles from which enabled him to grow his company and be a successful hedge fund, which is a very, very tough business. So it's really understanding for CEOs from our point of view is that their evolution and them evolving themselves and becoming more and more aware, more and more coherent is really the basis for them being able to achieve as much as they want for as long as they want in robust, perfect health. And that's what we strive to create for CEOs.
I had questions for you because you got my curiosity with that last CEO point. This is the audience here, but why did you go out of your monk mode and what did you learn from this year meditating?
So the reason why I went out of monk mode is because I like to integrate. I like to integrate experiences. So being an athlete, being a competitive athlete, like from the age of 10, I was winning national, regional, provincial titles, and also playing rugby, won 4 state titles, the teams that I was in. That was very outward for me, very like always on the go, always training. And then I had to crash and burn to realize that's not sustainable if you don't know how to rest and recover. I had no real concept. When you're young, you don't really have any concept of rest and recovery because you just generally have a lot of energy. And so, and it had to bring me back down to earth to realize you have to balance both sides of the equation. Yes, we have to be dynamic and active in the world, but we also have to have the ability to be silent and settled and coherent within. And so we don't accumulate and absorb stress. And a lot of CEOs will pride themselves on absorbing pressure and stress. And it's admirable on one level, but on another level, it leads to disaster. We actually don't want to absorb stress. We want to be able to be in a state where we're able to observe and not be affected and touched by the challenges and the pressure. And so, for whatever reason, I was led into the monkhood to realize that you have to balance that dynamism. And the way you balance dynamism and make it coherent and orderly is with silence. And so once I'd completed 10 years, I'd kind of felt like I'd balanced the equation from being so outward to realizing that the basis of being dynamic is being silent, just like the basis of shooting an arrow very powerfully and accurately is pulling it back. And so once I had done 10 years, I said, okay, now I want to integrate both the dynamic aspect of myself and the silent aspect of myself in this marketplace, because anyone can be enlightened, quote unquote, in a cave or a monastic setting, right? There's less distraction and noise and pressure coming at you because your focus is inward. Now, to be able to take that out and integrate that into the marketplace is a true test of where you're at in your development and your own inner coherence. So that's why I wanted the contrast and to be able to integrate both into the world, and that made me feel more complete, more whole. And it just was bringing that inner fulfillment that I developed through those 10 years into the world and creating outer fulfillment. Fulfillment is basically what we're all looking for, right? And inner fulfillment can be just feeling good, feeling healthy, feeling expanded and content in our heart, settled and peaceful in our mind. But then we want the outer fulfillment, which we get through achievement. We achieve something, we feel good, and maybe it'll last a week or two or whatever, and it's part of the package of fulfillment. But the real focus is that we want to have this fulfillment all the time, not just because we're achieving, right? And we want our achievement to be a byproduct of the fulfillment of who we are, and that we feel good inside of ourselves, and achievement is just a byproduct of that, versus trying to achieve, which I was an athlete, trying to get somewhere and accomplish something and be a champion at something, but then, just collapsing, and feeling no fulfillment whatsoever.
Did you learn something from your athlete career? Did you learn grit and how to handle pain? What came out of this?
Yeah, I learned that, because I ran 1,500 meters, 800 meters, which puts you into an oxygen debt very quickly. So I learned to be good at coping with that and pushing through that. But it got to a point where I was training so much and racing so hard that I'd built up so much lactic acid in my legs that I literally had bumps on the sides of my quads. You could actually feel the pockets of lactic acid in my legs. And I realized that was the point I started realizing, oh my God, recovery and rest is just as important, if not even more important than the training and the performance, right? Again, it comes back to this pulling back the arrow. We can't really fire an arrow well unless we pull it back, back to its source of dynamism. And this is where a lot of leaders fall over, is that they're firing these arrows and they're achieving something, but then they forget to pull the arrow back again. They just keep firing the arrows. They're not really pulling it back. They're not really coming back to themselves, having more development, more capacity, more coherence, which is what we talk about in our book, to be able to then fire another arrow in a more coherent way to hit another target. So it's that alternation that's very important, versus firing arrows and then burning out and then realizing, oh man, I now got to step out of the marketplace like this JetBlue CEO, heal myself, recover, and then maybe I'm ready to come back in, and you wasted, a couple of years.
Wow, lactic acid bumps. I've never heard about that. But yeah, if you overtrain, I mean, you need to rest. I guess back in the days, athletes were not much about that. Nowadays, it's common knowledge, and there's
Yep.
almost as much effort put on performance than rest. So
Yep.
yeah, for example, me taking magnesium before sleep nowadays, magnesium complex and so forth, and these ice baths, these saunas, and just checking in on sleep and how you feel when you wake up. Today I felt like shit when I wake up. Then I need to ask myself, why is it the food that I ate? Is it the stress? So your CEOs, they're kind of national athletes, but in the business world, do
Yes.
they have
Yeah.
like a nice routine? Do they prioritize recovery, or are they like all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, this is a real kind of syndrome where a leader mistakes themselves as a worker. So they start to become the worker busy bee, and then they start to take on so many things, and they say they're so busy, and they lose the awareness of being a leader who's actually there to give insight, give guidance, give direction, give support, you know? And so one of our leaders who grew a company from 8 million to over 8 billion said, yeah, it's the busy fool syndrome, where people get so busy about being busy that they're not really accomplishing anything. And so, a leader has to be very clear that they're a leader, that they own that they're completely a leader, and they don't get absorbed in just the work, that they're a worker bee. And so this is something that, we have to encourage them to do. We give them a technique. It's a technique that Ray Dalio, Jerry Seinfeld, Clint Eastwood, just about every major celebrity you can think of does this technique. It's a very simple, effortless, natural meditation technique that gives basically rest or reduces cortisol 30 to 40% in 20 minutes. Now, sleep will only reduce found only cortisol between 10 and 12%. So 8 hours of sleep will reduce your cortisol 10 to 12%. 20 minutes of this meditation, it's called Transcendental meditation, TM. It's a transcending meditation. It's not a mindfulness meditation. It actually allows you to really deeply settle, which releases stresses that sleep can't get rid of, actually gives you a reduction of cortisol, that stress hormone, which doesn't make you feel great, it makes you feel agitated, of 30 to 40%. So which one would you prefer to be using,
Yeah, it's fascinating also how the brain to me is just like a computer. You can give it orders. So while listening to you, I reflected on like what's really meditation, or why is guided meditation so easy and effective and effortless just because you have someone granting you the permission to relax and chill, you know? And sometimes yesterday, reflecting on that, maybe the thing that I did, I finished my day yesterday at 9 p.m. You know, it was a solid 16-hour day of work. It was quite intense. I love crunching one of these every now and then, you know, it like
Sure.
builds up muscle, but
Yep.
I think I didn't give my permission to relax once I was in bed. My brain was like just business, business, business. Went to bed, even like after I ate at 9, you know, and like the food entering my stomach, I called it stress food because I was still in business mode, like
Yep.
putting food in my body, right? Like not enjoying. Then I went to bed with that, I guess, and the result was shitty sleep. So
Yep.
sometimes like people should just punch command and orders in the brain, you know, like chill. It's fine to relax right now. It's fine to, you know, if you're starting a podcast, it's fine to be imperfect. As a leader, as a CEO, it's fine if you fucked up this and that. Tomorrow's a new day, and you have 100 more shots at the goal. You know, and CEOs, they're under such high pressure. I feel that, yeah, just the mindset and understanding how the brain behaves and the fact that you can order it to do things and it will do it. I think that can help a lot of folks.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's great that you're really aware of it, you know, how you're affecting yourself, because then you can affect change for yourself. If you're just not aware, you're just absorbing, like I said before, stuff, it's just going to accumulate and eventually something's going to happen like it happened to me and you burn out. So, you know, it's a really good point that you make about the brain because that's running the show. You know, that's the center of our ego, our personality is how our brain functions. And that extends into our immune system and our nervous system. So what they've found is that world-class athletes, business leaders, and musicians, when they're performing at their best, they're making their best decisions, they have a very unique style of brain functioning. And they've labeled it, the scientists have labeled it global alpha coherence. Now, what that means in layman's terms is that the brain has a great deal of orderliness and coherence across all hemispheres of the brain, which enables it to see bigger pictures, and it also enables it to see the finer details required to fill those bigger pictures. So we want to ideally be in this global alpha state, especially when we're awake and acting in the world as much as possible. And we want to stabilize being in the state so that even when we sleep, that sleep is a coherent sleep where you actually are having coherent thoughts that are helping the body recover and rejuvenate and gain insight, right? And so the more that we can give our mind and our brain the experience of being in this state, and they've found that there's three things that activate more and more global alpha in the brain. The first one is exercise because it develops mind-brain coordination. Well, actually, that's the third one that activates the most. The second one that activates the most is music, because listening to, but especially playing music, because it activates you mentally, emotionally, and physically. And then what they've found that activates the most global alpha in the brain is a transcending meditation that allows the mind to settle down to finer and finer levels of thinking from the conscious to the subconscious to that field of pure consciousness from which everything comes from. So the more that we can take time to experience that state, the more our brain stabilizes functioning in that state. So even when we're asleep, we can still have an element of being alert. Not that we're an insomniac, but I don't know if you've ever had the experience, and most of us have this experience before we wake up, where we realize we're asleep, but we're witnessing our sleep. We're in that kind of like restful awake state, right? And that's the state ideally we want to be in most of the time, even when we're sleeping, because it's a fourth state of consciousness beyond waking, dreaming, and sleeping. We fluctuate through these relative states of awareness. We're awake, we're asleep, we're dreaming, but beyond that is a fourth state of consciousness that is restfully alert, that observes all those states. And that's what allows us to be in an observing state so that we don't get caught up and trapped by activity and getting too stressed about things. We can just observe things and make better discernment.
Right. As a CEO, you know, I'm seeking to invent a device that would just tell you your levels of cortisols, adrenaline, and dopamine, endorphins, and kind of have a level that's like, oh, you're in this flow state now biochemically. I think that would help people be more aware of their states, you know. Like today I went on a run with my dogs. There was this other dogs trying to attack my dog. So I got in fight mode, you know. I probably
Yep.
still have that adrenaline an hour or an hour 30 after this happened in me. So probably need to chill because just like you talked about lactic acid, you know, there's a buildup of that in the brain. And after some time, your brain performance, they start to diminish if you don't rest up and recover.
Yep.
You get like brain cramps and stuff. So until I develop that technology, people can just be more aware, you know, and filter
Yes.
themselves and ask themselves about the event of the day and take time to sort of go through them. We're already out of time, Ramon. Thanks for today. Beautiful, but can you tell us where to fetch more information about yourself?
Sure. We're at newmavericks.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and where I'm active mostly on LinkedIn, actually, a little bit on Instagram, a little bit on YouTube, but mostly on LinkedIn.